Welcome to another episode of Our Table is Ready. Today I am here with Casie Gee, a local therapist here in Columbia, South Carolina. Casie grew up in Rock Hill with an abusive father, a very religious household, went to grad school here in Columbia at a local Bible college where she was introduced to conversion therapy to not be a lesbian. And about a month or a semester shy of getting a graduate degree from that same school, was kicked out because someone called the school and told them she was gay. At one time, a professor told her that she was too mentally ill to be a therapist for trauma, but lo and behold, she's overcome all of those odds and has somehow turned out to be pretty normal. So I can't wait for you to get to know Casie like I do. Casie, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, how about that?
Sounds good.
I just want to go ahead and get started because there's so much to tell, and I'm like, where do we start with this? Because there's a lot to tell, and I like the story because it has a great ending.
Yes.
And an ongoing ending.
That is the good news.
Yeah, that is really good. But so tell us about your childhood. What was that like?
Growing up, I went to a private Christian school pretty much, my whole life, essentially. So it was very small. Graduated with about 36 people in my class. And during that time, my dad was really abusive most of my life, but it became a lot more difficult and violent starting like middle school, high school. So
it was physically abusive?
Yeah, physically, pretty much all of the things were happening at some point in my home. And one of the ways I dealt with that was spirituality, right? Because I didn't have the security or really a lot of inner strength to rely on in that environment. And so people ask me now, the people that know me now are like, why did you ever go to a Bible college? And I'm like, that's a great, that you're gay, right? So why did you go? My answer to that is spirituality was the thing that kept me alive in my home growing up. So that became the most important thing in my life. And that was in the form of Christianity. And growing up, being gay wasn't an option. It was the kid's dad that got caught doing things they weren't supposed to do. That was the idea of gay, right, in our culture, I guess, growing up. So
if you were gay, you were caught, you were outed, and you were bad.
It was bad. But yeah, so that was kind of where that was, I guess, for me. It wasn't something I was like, I wonder if I am gay. Like, that wasn't even an option, I guess. I went to a Christian college because that was what was most important to me at the time. I had decided around the age of 16 that I wanted to be a therapist because I wanted to be to people what I did not have and what I knew that like kids and people going through the things that I was experiencing needed. So like I recognized that and wanted to do something different with my life. So I went to a Christian school because I wanted to study psychology, but because that was so important to me, I wanted to do it from a Christian perspective at the time.
Now, let me ask you this. Is your dad still alive?
He is.
Do you have any type of relationship with him?
Absolutely not.
Right. Are he and your mom still married?
No.
Yeah.
No. They got divorced when I was in college, I think. Yeah. He ended up, I don't know exactly what all substances were involved, but I think that crack started becoming an issue when I was around 8th, 9th grade. And that's when the violence really started. And for people that don't grow up in abusive homes, it's not the kind of thing where like every day I went home and I was scared of being hit, right? Like it wasn't an everyday thing. It was things would be whatever they were, that sense of normalcy, and then it would explode. So it wasn't every day all the time, right? There are moments of good things, but when you're living with a parent like that, you don't have a sense of safety, but you also become very hypervigilant, right? Because you have to read people's moods constantly to try to stay safe. He kind of lost it after I graduated high school. So the summer between high school and then going to college was really bad. Shortly before I came here to Columbia to go to school, I got a call from my mom, and she told me I had to go somewhere that wasn't at my house because my dad was on some rampage and was like going around and threatening to kill all of us. So that was very scary. So I ended up actually moving to Columbia early, like a week early, because I had to get out of Rock Hill because he was so
get away from
unpredictable and violent. Yeah.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a younger brother. His name is Chris, and he is 3 years younger than me. So we grew up together. I have another sibling that I've never met. His name is Brian. Older half sibling. I never knew about him. I was about 20 when my dad was like, "Oh, by the way." And I was like, this is really weird. Cool. You have a sibling you never knew about. But this is the weirdest part. We have the same birthday.
Really?
10 years apart.
Wow.
How weird is that?
Yeah.
So yeah, I've never met him. My brother Chris has met him and spent time with him, but I
Interesting.
never did.
Interesting. All right, so you came to this local Bible college here to go to undergrad school to escape the abuse at home.
Yes.
We'll set this up for a dramatic twist.
That is, yep.
And and while you were here, you got involved with the conversion therapy. And how did that happen?
I had a relationship with a woman before, like it was actually the summer before I went to school. This person was significantly older than me. She was also a very sick individual, but she was very predatory, and she was abusive as well. I didn't know that at the time, right? Because when you grow up with abuse, that's what's normal and that's what feels comfortable. So because I had had that relationship, I struggled with it when I went to college because I believed that being gay was wrong. And so I had ended that relationship, but that was like something that was present that I was struggling with. So that was kind of how that issue came up and like entered the picture. The way that I saw it at the time was almost the way that you view an addiction, something I felt pulled towards and that felt true for me in some ways. But I believed that it was wrong, and I believed that that was not what I was supposed to be doing.
Being gay.
Being gay.
Yeah.
Yes. That's something that I had been open with TAs or like the RAs that we had in our dorms and things like that, people that were more mentors for me. And so that's how that issue came up and was kind of entered in the conversation. I don't remember how I came across the ministry that I was involved with that.
With the conversion therapy.
Yeah. They've now come out publicly and closed their doors and everything, so I think it's so fine for me to speak openly about them specifically.
So that leader, he apologized for doing that.
On a national level, international level,
What is that like? Because you sent me a picture of you at with a microphone at a conference for the conversion therapy.
Yeah.
And like, what were you saying in that picture?
I was sharing my story about how like God had saved me from being gay, basically.
So is that the primary thing that they do? Like if you pray the gay away?
Yeah, essentially.
Is there any like brainwashing thing? Because when I think of it, I don't know what I think. I just think really creepy and crazy and disgusting and abusive.
Yes.
Like what? Are they only like, ooh, you're not gay anymore?
I have not had experience with whatever is like actual therapy. I didn't go to a therapist specifically to try to not be gay. Therapists that I saw were Christian therapists, but it wasn't, I don't know exactly what all they do in like conversion therapy, which sounds way more like that, especially when young people are like coerced into it. So it was Exodus International Ministries was kind of the hub, right? The overall program that was associated with all these more local ministries. And so they were all part of like a network. So that was more like a self-help type group. The local one was. It was primarily peer-led, so it was led by people that had struggled with it and I guess had come to whatever they decided they had come to, and so they were helping others. It was a kind of a weird dance because at that point, although most Christians that I knew believed that being gay was wrong and was sin, they were starting to back off a little bit on the actual being gay because people were starting to realize that like it wasn't actually a choice. Yeah. So like if you don't believe it's a choice, then what, right? With this belief system. And what that kind of looked like and what I've literally been told was like, it's okay to be gay, it's just not okay to act on it. Because the act of being gay, aka having gay sex, is the sin.
That's the sin.
That's the sin. So as long as you don't act on it, you're okay.
You can be it, you can feel it, and you can think it. You just can't act on it. And then what do you do with that? Like,
and you don't act on it. Yeah. And you treat it like an addiction, really.
It's real easy for me as a gay man to laugh at it. And when I hear about it and people talk about it, I go crazy and I think these idiots and that believe that it can work or that try to do it. And when I talk to another gay person who's been through it and has told me about it, it's really sad.
It is.
And very, it's such a level of abuse that is not seen as abusive.
Yes. So the thing that people don't understand is I lived my life for, I don't know, almost a decade, truly believing that I could either have God and spirituality, which, remember, this is what saved my life, or I could be true to who I felt I was.
Right.
And so, I mean, I dated guys. I tried to be straight, right? Like I did the things because that's what you were supposed to do, right? Like God designed a man to be with a woman, and that's his perfect design. Therefore, if you are not, like, there's something wrong with you if you can't do that, essentially. It was extremely painful to live with that conflict for such a long time and to not, I don't know, just not really be able to find peace with any of those things.
I definitely was in the closet and, dated girls and just thought it would change or go away and all that stuff. But, it's different when you have this organization that saved your life at one point pushing this. Yeah. So it's completely different.
And it was, I mean, Christianity was, such a huge part of my life that my almost entire identity was kind of wrapped up in my spiritual beliefs as well. And so what people don't understand when they say, I don't believe in being gay. Well, number one, like, it exists. So I don't know what you believe or not believe, but that it exists. But if you don't believe it's right, like, you don't understand that what you are saying to me is that there's something inherently wrong with the core of who I am. It's not a behavior, right? So it's easy for people to sit on the sidelines and say, it's a choice.
Yeah.
It's not a choice. I don't know.
I mean, I've tried to choose the other many times.
I tried.
I always wonder about those people that say it's a choice. I'm like, well, what do you mean it's a choice? Because that means you've decided. You think you've decided to like the other sex?
Like, can you like choose to be what?
Yeah.
If I can choose it, why can't you choose it?
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
But it's not a choice. It's not a behavior, because it's not something that you can just change, right? Like, it's so much more about like who I am as a person than just don't do this thing. Exactly. And so the message is, you're not, like, you're broken. And you can't be fixed, essentially.
Yeah.
And so, but they believe that Jesus can fix you. And so then you're stuck with, okay, well, if Jesus can fix me, but he hasn't fixed me, then now I'm even more wrong.
Yeah, and unloved.
And unloved.
You had an experience at the school with the abuse, with the TA.
Yes. My time at that school, I did an undergrad. I graduated, and then I stayed on to do a graduate program for clinical counseling. And during that time, some mental health issues come up shortly before that semester. Understandably so, with everything that was going on at my home at the time. Everything kind of came to a head, and I went into an intensive outpatient program. Because of that, the school decided to work with me, which was great, and they appointed a TA, so a teacher's assistant, to be the liaison between me and the school, so I could keep up with my schoolwork and all those kinds of things. And so, and she did that. After that, we became friends, and I had disclosed to her some things about like childhood sexual abuse that had happened. And I still am not completely sure how all of this transpired as far as like where she got the idea and all of that stuff. But I was in a very vulnerable place.
Clearly.
I'd been abused my entire life, and was really struggling with my mental health, started getting on my feet. I had shared that with her. And then at some point she decided that the way that I would be healed from that abuse was for it to be reenacted. And it was for her to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and that is what would heal me.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what happened. Obviously, it did not heal me.
Correct.
Something that I blocked out for a long time and just kind of shoved away for a really long time, because it was so confusing to me that I couldn't make any sense out of it. And so I just kind of put it away because it just didn't make any sense to me. And then I also blamed myself for it for a really long time. But I thought it was my fault.
Yeah.
So.
Of course.
And then I thought it was like extra my fault because it didn't fix me.
Right. Again.
It made it worse because it was abuse. I've had a lot of religious trauma, obviously, because of the gay thing, but then also that, and being in an environment that's very like patriarchal.
These figures of authority or authority figures, and you know, from the school, from your dad, the school, to Jesus, to this TA.
Yes.
Everything, it all adds up.
when there's an authority figure, there's an imbalance of power. And so when you are raised with more of an authoritarian parent, you are literally trained to do what people tell you to do to stay safe.
Exactly.
Right? And so it's more than just, oh, I'm being given instruction and I'm choosing to do this. And so with a lot of abuse that happens with that, with the authority piece, something that comes up is the fawn response. A learned behavior of pleasing another person and doing and saying what you think that they want to hear, and because that's going to keep you safe, right? And so that's something that often we learn as young children, to stay safe in our homes, but then this automatic response will come up. People will feel a lot of shame about it because it's like, well, why did I respond that way when I want to set a boundary or I want to be true to who I am? But there's that fawning response. A lot of the survival strategies that we learn when we're young are the ones that we
stick with us. Many times I'm like, why did I react like that? And it can always be traced back, or most of the time.
A lot of the time, if we have an experience where something initiates that intense response in you, where you feel hijacked by an emotional response, where you feel like you have little to no control over it, there's a good possibility it's a trauma response. So when we have those experiences, it can be really confusing for us, but it does typically come from previous experiences.
So you got married in, was it college or grad school? You graduated?
Grad school.
Okay, so you graduated college from that school. What did you get your degree in?
Psychology and Bible.
And Bible. And then you went to grad school at that college. And you got married to a woman.
I did.
So you were okay with being gay by this point, obviously.
Kind of. So the things with that TA were happening at the time. Now that I'm older and I look back, I can see that a lot of my behavior with this other person that I ended up marrying was like rebellion almost. Because that TA didn't just, there ended up being a very like controlling, abusive relationship with that. It wasn't ever like a sexual romantic relationship, but it was very sick and controlling. I can see now I was almost being like a rebellious teenager, right? Didn't feel like I had any choice, and so started like acting out. I still was struggling with whether it was okay or not, honestly, and still kind of viewed it in that sense. But I ended up, shocker, this person was abusive, very abusive. And so again, just that pattern of when we don't know what is healthy and what is appropriate, we don't have alarm bells that go off. It feels comfortable.
Right.
Healthy feels uncomfortable for people that have been raised and had these life experiences, right? So essentially, I've kind of gone from one abuser to another. I ended up getting with that person. They were abusive, violent, ended up being kind of coerced into getting married. And this was before the SCOTUS ruling for the national same-sex marriage.
Okay.
So there were some states where it was legal, but South Carolina was not one of them. And when we were living here in South Carolina, when I would try to leave or kind of get out of the house or leave the relationship, she'd threaten me and she'd tell me, well, you literally, you can't get rid of me because you can't divorce me. I was trying to keep the two very separated because I knew that
the school
and this girl, I knew that there could be a lot of consequences. And so I told her not to post something on Facebook, and she ended up posting it. By the time I saw it and made her take it down, people from the school had seen it.
So it's a policy, or it was a policy at the time, you just cannot be gay.
There's a student handbook that you sign every semester, and there's the behavioral guidelines that you ascribe to. And one of those, it wasn't necessarily like specifically written out in the handbook until after me.
Really?
Yeah.
You did something.
I did. I did.
Published.
They added, you can't, they put the words in there, and they added the trans thing in there as well after I ended up getting
what's it
kicked
say?
out. I honestly can't tell you right now because
Oh,
I could probably pull it up.
I mean, oh my gosh.
I'm sure it's
so
online.
it's still a policy?
Absolutely.
So if somebody's
Absolutely.
there, if somebody's at the school and they're gay, we could call and say that person's gay and they could be booted out. Because you were kicked out with the semester left to go to get your graduate degree.
Yep.
You didn't get any credits?
No.
And no money back?
No. No, I got to keep all my student loans.
Oh my God.
I have all of those still. I was about 15 credit hours away from graduating, and I was in class, and somebody came to the door and pulled me out of class, walked me down to the dean of students office, and they handed me a letter, and they said, "You're out," and they escorted me off campus, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah, and in the letter, it delineated several requirements for being considered to be readmitted to the school. One was to not be in a same-sex relationship for, I think they said 2 years. One was to be actively involved in a church for over 2 years. Another one was actually do conversion therapy.
I was going to say,
yeah, it
had to have been.
Yeah, conversion therapy was required, and I had to write, I think, an 8 to 10 page paper on why being gay was wrong. And
I mean, it's not funny. It's just so crazy.
It is absurd, but this happened in 2011. So
and it could happen here in 2023.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So, yeah.
How did your friends react at the time? I mean, were they supportive?
No. Pretty much almost everybody cut me off.
Wow.
Yeah, my entire world, these people that I really trusted, and I mean, that was my entire community. My whole life was wrapped up in not only Christianity, but in this specific community of people.
It's grad school. 15 hours short. What do? You go home, you bawl your eyes out.
I shut down.
Yeah.
And, I was already in kind of survival mode. I got kicked out of grad school. I was with that person for maybe 2 years or so, and then was finally able to leave. By the time I left that relationship, I had nothing left. I really struggled towards the end when I was trying to leave not because of the person at all, honestly. It was because loyalty is one of my core values. And it's it is like literally the only thing I had left was my loyalty and my word. And so that's what kept me there longer, because if I left, I'd already given up everything. And if I left and I broke that, then what would I be?
Right.
I would have nothing. But I ended up being able to get through that and left. I had to wait until the SCOTUS ruling went through, but as soon as it did, I filed for divorce.
All right, so you got a job. You started working in the substance abuse field.
Yep. So I came back to Columbia. I ended up in AA, And I was in AA for a year or so. And then that's when I started working at a government agency, doing grants and policy around substance use. And I was really excited about that job because I wanted to be able to advocate for people at, state level, so, and people in recovery.
And did you have substance
Yeah,
issues?
so, looking back, I don't know if the substances were the primary problem, but I had lots of problems.
Yeah.
And the substances weren't helping. They weren't helping.
Yeah.
I really found a home in AA after all of these years of abuse, and I ended up being able to come back here and land at a friend's house, and AA really came around me and saved my life. Honestly, I needed the support and the guidance and all of that. So there was substance use, and I got sober and stayed sober for several years in AA, and it really just changed my life in a lot of ways. It really changed the trajectory of my life. So when I think about that time, that was 2014, when I think about that time, that's when the trajectory really started changing for me, as far as being able to find recovery, not just from substances, but from the abuse and the trauma that I had experienced, and all the PTSD that I was struggling with at the time.
When did you go back to school to get because clearly now that you're a therapist, you went back to grad school.
I did. I worked at that agency for a few years, got on my feet, got some stability, and really didn't know if I'd ever be able to go back or not at that time. And I was really scared to go back.
How do you mean you didn't know you would be able to go back?
I didn't know if I would have the opportunity. I didn't know if I'd have it in me. Graduate school was so
That's
traumatizing.
What I can't imagine. I feel like it'd be going up a mountain, and every step would be 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
I went into total avoidant mode, and so just ran from everything. So part of the first few years when I was in AA was really just facing things, getting my feet underneath me, and really starting to work on some of that lack of self-confidence and all of those things. So I did work up the courage. A friend of mine said, hey, you need to go talk to this person down at the grad school at USC for social work. I think you'd be great with social work. And so I went down there and met with her, and I really liked the program. And so I applied and got accepted and went back to school.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, when did you stop saying, I can't believe I'm having to do this again? How long did you have a resentment towards it? Do you remember?
Until I graduated.
What was that day like?
Amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I couldn't believe that I had actually gotten to the point where I'd accomplished this. It really was closing the closing the door or the window or on a chapter of my life that was very, very difficult. And so I specifically ordered the tassels for gay and lesbian pride. Yes, I did. And I wore it, and it had a lot of significance.
Yeah.
A lot of significance.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So graduated, was in honors and all that stuff.
Really?
Yeah. And, that's another thing that we don't necessarily talk about a whole lot with trauma, is the impact it can have on our potential, our ability to perform. I always knew that I was smart, but I really struggled with school in a lot of ways. And looking back now, I can see that a lot of that had to do with the mental health and the trauma and dealing with things at home, because when I was in a different place and I went to grad school, the last time I went to grad school, I was actually able to focus on schoolwork. And I was actually able to do well because I didn't have all of that other stuff weighing on me.
So what about, where are you in recovery now? Like, do you still attend 12-step groups?
Nope. So I've gone back and forth over the years of really trying to find my path. I have been more interested in digging underneath the substance use stuff and to find the why, right? So what's underneath it, what's the motivation and what's driving it. And, you know, so there's something that in one of the 12-step groups, I think it's SA. There's SAA and SA. There's a lot of them. One of them defines sobriety for you, but this one, I think it's Sexaholics Anonymous. I could be wrong about which one it is. But what they do is they do something with 3 circles. Are you familiar with this?
That's SAA.
SAA. Yeah. And I really like that idea, right? So you look at the middle circle. What are the problematic behaviors? What are the things that are absolutely not okay, right? What are those gray areas, the sliding down the slope kind of areas? And then what are the healthy things, right? And so for whatever reason, it feels more comfortable for me. I tend to err to that side of things of like, okay, like let's not put a whole lot of judgment on this. Let's find out what's actually going on. You know, are there, like, can you moderate? Maybe you can. I don't know, right? And even the big book says that. If you have questions, go try to drink two drinks and see how it goes.
See how it goes. And I think that passage, they're not counting on that working for people.
Right.
But, and you know, I definitely, abstinence has been my thing and it's worked well for me.
Absolutely.
But I do have clients now where, you know, it's let's try the moderation, and some have decided to, you know, be completely sober, and some are successful at moderating it. You know, I used to laugh at that word. I laugh at that word when I talk about myself. I mean, me moderate? No. Like 3 cookies, 3 beers? No, none of that's going to happen. You know, 3 anything is just not going to work.
Right.
But I have a more disease. But it does work for somebody, and I'm finding that very interesting because I, you know, grew up in 12-step recovery. And
what we don't necessarily take into consideration with 12-step, especially when we're in it, is that we don't see what happens to everybody that doesn't come back. Right?
Yeah.
So oftentimes we'll just assume that, oh, they're off using again, or they're just, maybe they are living a successful life. Maybe they're not. I don't know. But there's a lot of data missing from that equation. One of the challenges I've had with 12-step has been a challenge I've had with a lot of just organizations in general, is that I really feel like anytime humans congregate and come together around an ideology or a belief, it can become very black and white, right? And so if this is the thing that binds us, this is the truth, and this is our truth, and so you can either come and be a part of this or not. But this works, and because it works for us, it should work for you too. Right? And so AA, again, absolutely saved my life. However, there was a time where I wanted to move beyond more black and white thinking. And when I left AA, I had a handful of people that really loved me and like stuck with me, and I had a lot that didn't. You know, and you know, that was similar with the church. I think it speaks more to where those people are, you know, with like their ability to be comfortable around certain things. But yeah, I've struggled with that part of 12-step, of it being this way or no way. Because I don't see that working for everybody. It works for some people, and again, absolutely saves people's lives. Like, I love 12-step. However, it's not for everybody. And then after, you know, we haven't gotten to this part in the story, but working in substance use directly with people, doing treatment with people, seeing that 12-step can cause a lot of wounds, you know, and it can hurt a lot of people in just being so dogmatic about things.
I've certainly been more cognizant of it as far as working on the trauma. You know, Gabor Mate is quite the ringleader. And he was in 12 Steps, and I don't know if he still is or not, but he was in it for years, and he really likes to concentrate on the trauma part of being the cause, the root cause.
He is wonderful. There is a YouTube video, Gabor Mate, Trauma and Addiction. I recommend anybody watch it. It's great. But when we talk about the trauma piece, and 12-step, I love to hear that people are, you know, really starting to focus more on working through the trauma piece of it. I do think that it's worth mentioning that we have to be really careful when we're walking people through a 4th step. Because if you do it, and it's just, this is based on my experience of AA and 12-step. It can be done other places, other places, I'm sure. But my experience has been, it can often become shaming when we're telling people to look for their role in something when they were abused and it's not their role. They don't have a role in it. And so I do think that we need to be mindful of that and careful. Just, you know, 12-step as a whole, I would love to see more people become educated on trauma, just so they don't accidentally re-traumatize somebody. You know, because if you were abused, that's not your fault.
What would be something, like if I were walking someone through a 4th-step and it was trauma and they said, what's my part? Because I mean, initially, like I would say, oh, it's not your fault. But they've got this resentment towards the abuser, of course. Like what would be?
With the resentment towards an abuser, I mean, that's a healthy emotion. Anger is a healthy emotion because anger tells me that you know that you have value. Right? If I'm angry that you hurt me, then that says that I know I have value. And so with the abuse things, it's important to allow people to walk through that emotional process and to validate the feelings. People, when they share trauma with you, they need to be witnessed. Like oftentimes people just need their story witnessed. They need us to create safety for them to just be and somebody to be with them in it. As humans, we want to fix everything, you know.
Codependence.
You know, and it's hard for me even as a therapist, right? I have somebody sitting in front of me that I care very deeply for, and they're in so much pain, and like, I want to fix it for them, you know? But the reality is, like, we can't fix other people. But what we can do, and what is powerful, is be with them in it. Non-judgmentally, be with them in it. And as helpers, we are not the authority on them, right? I tell people all the time, like, I'm not the expert on you. You're the expert on you. I might have some skills, right? But it's not my job to come in and to tell you what's wrong with you and what you need to fix and all of those things. It's my job to come alongside you, and to support you, and to help you find your path. I think that's one thing I've become very convinced of, or just really strongly believe in, is that everybody has to find their own answers and their own path. Because I can tell you that plenty of people try to give me answers, but I didn't listen to any of them, right? Because I needed to find my own answers. And that was honestly part of the leaving AA, was because I wanted to find my own answers, because I needed them for myself. At a time, I needed to take truth or reality from somebody else and apply it, right? I needed that because I needed some structure. But then at some point, like, I really wanted to figure out, like, what are my answers? Because once I find my answer, I'm going to live by that versus me telling you, you know?
Yeah.
And
definitely.
so helping people stumble their way through finding their answers. Because at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to go to sleep with your own conscience and stuff, you know?
Tell me about it.
So.
How about did you ever find out who called the school? And
I
told?
did. I got a Facebook message from somebody that I hadn't spoken to in very, very long time, probably 10 years. And they told me that they were the ones that called the school and that they stopped being my friend when I got kicked out, not because they didn't want to be my friend, but because they were so ashamed of what they had done.
Yeah.
And they apologized for what they did. And I didn't expect to get the message. Did not expect it to be this person. She was one of my best friends. She was one of my roommates for years. She went and spent time at my grandparents' house with me in Florida. You know, like, I had been to her family's house for things. So, like, she was somebody that was close to me.
This wasn't just a mean girl.
No. And I sat down and I thought about it for a few minutes. And I was like, you know what? I had already forgiven her. Because at this point in my life, I literally could not imagine my life turning out any other way, right? Like, if I hadn't gotten kicked out of school, then I wouldn't have the life experience that I have. I wouldn't have the understanding that I have when people sit in my office. I wouldn't be able to see the things that I see in people's lives. If I didn't have all those experiences.
Trauma can be a teacher.
It really can.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
unfortunately
what you do with it.
Yeah. It's say that again.
It's what you do with it.
Exactly. Right.
Right. There's plenty of people that come from very abusive homes that don't go on to become abusers. So that doesn't mean that it's always easy, right? A lot of times there's anger issues. Like, there's a lot of gray area there. A lot of gray area, but it's not an excuse.
No.
For
yeah, at all. And which leads me to the professor who told you were too mentally ill.
Yeah.
What was it? Too mentally ill to work in trauma or to be a therapist in general?
At the time, so back in that first grad program, I was struggling, obviously, with my mental health because I was being abused. But because of that, they required me to meet with one of the professors regularly to do therapy, who was also my professor. But these were all therapists that were running the program. So, like, ethics and dual role there was all kinds of not okay going on there. But I was required to meet with this person to stay in the program. And yeah, she told me one day, she said, "You're too sick to be a therapist. And if you ever do make it in life, your life's always going to be very difficult."
Wow. And what would you like to say to her today? Surprise, we have her here. That'd be awesome.
You might need to edit that out. So I'm not going to say the first thing that comes to mind.
Exactly.
But
ha ha.
But you were wrong.
Yeah, there you
go. Completely wrong.
So wrong. Well, that's great.
Yeah, I had people at the time trying to get me to apply for disability for mental health stuff. But looking back now, I can see I was being abused. I was also heavily over-medicated at the time. And there were a lot of other things going on.
Wow.
So.
Wow. Yep. I'm glad you're on this side of it.
Oh my God, me too.
On this side of you, hearing about it and everything. And
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for listening. And I'm going to go ahead and thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting. What did you think? What are your thoughts? And yeah, let us know. Thanks, and we'll see you on the next Our Table is Ready.